What would you do if you were not afraid? What new thing would you try? What new relationship might you consider if you were not afraid? If you can relate to any of that, today's video is for you. Hi, I'm Peggy Oliveira. Thank you so much for being here. If you're new, make sure to subscribe and click the little bell for notifications. So I think we've all probably heard that question at some point. What would you do if you knew you could not fail? What would you do if you're not afraid? And I think there can be some quick answers that we can come up with. And I also think for a lot of us, there can be some really powerful, deeper answers if we allow ourselves the space to dig a little bit deeper. And I think that's helpful to consider because, there are things like maybe you'd try bungee jumping, maybe you'd go back to school, and not that that's easy, but it's like the things that are common kinds of things that are pretty widespread kinds of things that people would want to potentially do. Like if I wasn't afraid, I would quit my job and start my own business or something like that. But I think for a lot of people, there is a lot more depth to this question, actually to the answer to that question. So thinking about if you lived from a place of feeling fully free, feeling grounded, deeply rooted in the truth of who you are, your worthiness, your ability, your deservingness, what might you do? What might you try? What might you consider? What relationship would you maybe like to spark? Maybe that relationship is even with yourself. Letting yourself really connect to those fears. Fear of failing, fear of the ideas that you hold about yourself being true, that you really aren't deserving of something good or exciting, that you really are a failure at the core of your being, that you really can't do anything right. These are some pretty significant fears and ideas that a lot of us hold. And on one level, we may be able to say, oh, I know I can do anything I set my mind to. For so many of us, there is this deep-seated core belief that no matter what we do, it's never going to fully make us worthy. It's never going to be enough for us to be able to really feel grounded in that sense of knowing that we are always enough. But just because that fear is there, no matter how long it's been there, it doesn't make it true. It never has been true. But because of what you believe about who you are, based on what you've experienced in your life and what it taught you, you haven't had yet the experience of being able to really trust that something different could be true for you. In fact, is true for you. So it doesn't have to be something that is actually external, that is going to change your life. But how would you feel differently? How would you move about your life differently if you are able to fully trust in your enoughness, that no matter what the circumstances, whether you get the job or not, whether your partner leaves you or not, that you are enough, that you can get through it, that you have the strength, that it isn't because you're undeserving. Can you imagine what that would feel like for you? It can be hard, I know, if you've never felt it. And I want to be clear that in those moments that are really hard, even the person with the most confidence, it can be shaken in those moments. But the difference is that it's shaken, but it comes right back. Kind of the idea of being grounded and deeply rooted. So even in a storm, the tree is going to sway, but then it comes back and nothing has changed. You are still firmly grounded in your worthiness. I know it can be hard to believe that there could be a time when you can feel that. But it doesn't mean it isn't possible for you. Because you don't have to do anything or change who you are for that to be true. That is already true because of who you are, who you've always been. Healing isn't about achieving that, about becoming a different person. It's about being able to see and connect to the truth of who you've always been. Always. But the abuse, the difficulty, the betrayal, it all makes us view who we are through this lens of being bad and unworthy and undeserving. It creates a lot of shame. And so anytime that we look at ourselves, think about ourselves, it's through that lens. But that lens is not reality. What is real is who you are, who you've always been. The mistakes, the unhealthy coping mechanisms, all of that is about things that you've done, ways that you've coped, ways that you learned to cope. But none of those things are who you are. And not all of those things are necessarily actual mistakes. Being human means that we're going to screw things up sometimes. It means that we're going to make unhealthy choices. That's just part of being human. But none of that defines who we are. And I know you might be sitting there right now thinking, yeah, but there was this time that I did this, or yeah, but I really screwed this up, or I've wasted so much time, or whatever it is. Is there a but that you came up with? That isn't actually real. Yes, you might have done those things. You might have felt those ways. But those things do not define who you are. Those things do not have any bearing on your worthiness and what is possible for your life. All of this healing, the awareness, the practicing, the process, all of it is about coming back home to you, to accepting the truth of who you are, all of who you are. A person who makes mistakes, a person who occasionally lets people down. Ideally not intentionally, but we're going to let people down at times. And those things can be true at the same time that it can be true that you are still worthy. Remember that healing is not about changing who you are. Yes, your life changes, how you show up changes, but that changes because you've come back home to you, because you've been able to begin to trust in the truth that you are worthy, that you are capable, that you're deserving. Doesn't mean that you believe it all the time. Again, it doesn't mean that you're not going to sway every once in a while. It just means that you trust in those roots, that you know that that exists for you. And so as you think about what would you do if you knew you could not fail, or what would you do if you were not afraid? How would you show up differently? Who would you engage with? What might you say? What boundary would you set? What boundary would you release for yourself that maybe you've kept around you to keep yourself safe, or because you didn't think you were deserving of something? What would you say yes to for you in your life? I'd really like to encourage you to think about that. I'd also really encourage you to maybe journal a little bit and maybe come back to this a couple of different times, or maybe even more, because each time that you allow yourself an opportunity to sit with something like this, your answer might be different depending on the day, depending on what's happened that day, depending on how much sleep you got or didn't get, how stressed you're feeling. If you felt really connected that day, what you write is likely going to be different on a day that you just felt really stressed out. And seeing that, writing that, recognizing all of that can actually be really helpful in this process. So I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Share your thoughts. What came up for you as you listened? What would be different for you if you fully trusted that you were able to feel in your being that sense of groundedness, that you are absolutely enough? Share in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Have a beautiful day.